Hello, everyone. I'm Nicole Barbano, and this is the Hunter Ambrose Podcast. Today, we're joined by two incredible guests, Eric Collett, CEO, and Randy Vawdrey, nurse practitioner and medical director for A Mind for All Seasons. This is an organization that is transforming brain health and cognitive care. And equally as important, joining me today is not only co-host, but the first time we've had a co-host on the show, Dr. Robert Cavagnol. Dr. Rob is a physician leader, healthcare strategist, veteran, and a longtime champion of medical innovation. Rob, thanks for joining me today.
Yeah, Nicole, super excited. And, one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about this topic, it's personal to me. I've got family members who are dealing with dementia, and, the number of people who are requiring long-term care continues to accelerate in this country. And so this is such an important topic, and I'm really glad that we're spending time on it today.
Rob, just a little bit. I know that people might know you from the previous podcast that we did a few months ago. Just out of curiosity, how did you and Eric meet before we dive into the show?
Yeah, Eric and I were connected through a mutual friend who thought we'd have something in common. And so we set up a call. Eric was very generous with his time. And I was just really intrigued about his organization, his business, the science behind it. I think we scheduled a 45-minute call that went an hour and a half the first time we connected.
Yeah. All right, everyone, let's dive in. We are going to be talking with Eric and Randy, and this is going to be a conversation, I think, for everyone, not just for themselves, but for the family members that we all have that are aging and that we want to age well. Let's get started. Kind of wanted to start with, tell us about what you're doing in the market. What are you doing in this space? And Eric, tell us about you. What's going on?
Yeah, thanks so much. We're excited to be here. So I'll give you a little bit of backstory that leads us straight into today.
Please.
I stumbled onto a career in assisted living and memory care, became an executive director, had a successful 16-year career doing that. And toward the end of that, I was getting asked to get on a lot of stages and train people how to do what we were doing, which largely was being able to take on really difficult Alzheimer's patients that were getting kicked out of other facilities and turn things around. And I had developed a framework that we had test driven with our team that allowed us to approach people more successfully. So that combined with some family situation and the need to have a little bit more control over my schedule gave me a lot of reasons to start my own company. So I started A Mind for All Seasons in 2016, intending to just be a solopreneur and train family and professional caregivers around the world how to do the kinds of things that I was doing. And about a year into it, through a mutual client and assisted living facility in East Mesa, Arizona, Randy and I were brought together and we got acquainted with each other. And Randy had a lot of advanced training in how to help people with neurological disorders and neurodegenerative diseases and how to actually identify root cause issues and from a medical standpoint, turn things around and help people function better. And I'll let him tell you more about his background, but when I met with him, gosh, I'll never forget sitting in his living room and having him pull out this family Bible-sized stack of research and boom, clunking it down on the coffee table. And we started chatting, and that took us from 6 o'clock till after midnight. And we realized, oh my goodness, it's like you have the science and I have the art, and 1 + 1 is 10. And we went all in to try to create a truly organized system for helping people in assisted living and memory care communities reverse symptoms of cognitive decline to whatever degree possible, help the staff interact more effectively, etc. And as we started building that, we started seeing successes, the likes of which I never thought possible. One of our early clients had been to 3 different neurologists who had diagnosed him with dementia, and each one confirmed the diagnosis of the other and said, I'm sorry, there's not a lot that we could do. And as he progressively got worse, eventually his children talked to his wife, their mom, and said, Mom, you can't keep doing this. It's killing you to try to take care of all these issues at home. You need to get some help for Dad. So they moved him into the facility where Randy and I were piloting what became known as the Enhanced Protocol.
When did A Mind for All Seasons, when did you and Randy found this company?
I started it in 2016, but it really became what it now is starting in about 2017. So he's about 2017. At baseline, this gentleman had a cognitive score of 15 out of 30. And we did an extensive panel of blood work, looked at nutrients and hormones and inflammatory markers and metabolic parameters, et cetera. And then Randy wrote a treatment summary that said, hey, you've got some holes in the boat that are sinking the ship, and here's exactly what I think you should do about these things. And we worked with the staff in this facility to implement it. Long story short, that gentleman went from a score of 15 out of 30 to 30 out of 30 in about 6 months, and he moved back home. And that was one of those early moments where I went, oh my goodness, we're on to something that can completely revolutionize a profession. That then led to family members of these residents we were working with coming to us and saying, if you can make that big of a difference in my parent or my spouse, and they have a dementia diagnosis, what could you do for my brain? And that led to us learning more about things like mental health challenges and post-concussion syndrome and traumatic brain injury, et cetera. And it sort of organically led to developing a private client side of the business where we're helping people of different ages with various types of brain health problems. But everything that we do is just one process called the Enhanced Protocol that's designed to measure root cause factors that affect how the brain functions and apply what the very best current research tells us that we could do about those things, and then measure progress and make adjustments so that we can objectively know whether we're making a difference or not. And it's been an amazing ride so far.
It's impressive, and it's a lot to unpack, I think, because the first thing I go to is, what about the people who aren't already experiencing the decline? And so I know that, Rob, you've got more of the physician questions for this. I'm going to hold mine for right now because I'm 56. So what about my age group, so that this population never has to be there? But Rob?
Well, I love your comment, Nicole, that this population never has to be there. So one important fact I think matters to this conversation, and it's the fact that anybody can find, if they go to the Alzheimer's Association website, you don't have to dig very hard to find that Alzheimer's disease, the most common cause of dementia symptoms, really starts, as far as the pathology, 20 or more years before symptoms show up. So by the time people are in their 40s, 50s, 60s, there can be a lot going on pathologically, but no symptoms. The brain will fight really hard to maintain functioning. And when you combine that with the fact that people commonly confuse what is common with being normal when it comes to aging, and they assume things like getting more and more forgetful and having a harder time getting their work done and processing speeds really slowing down significantly. They think, oh, I'm just getting older. And often they're not. Often it's just little warning lights on the dashboard that are getting missed. But if we measure the right things early and intervene, a lot of the top researchers in the Alzheimer's world these days say, hey, we shouldn't have so much Alzheimer's disease. It's largely preventable. We can do so much to change the trajectory. And there's a ton of stuff that we could talk through as far as what does that look like in practical terms.
Randy, let's drag you into the conversation. So, Eric, you had mentioned the Enhanced Protocol, and I think you said the Bible-sized packet of research that Randy shared. So, Randy, there's going to be a lot of physicians listening in to this, and as a physician, I know we're scientists at heart. We want to understand the research and the data, and not looking for an encyclopedia of everything. But explain to us the research behind this. Maybe share one or two landmark studies that have the evidence behind the Enhanced Protocol.
In 2015, a pharmacist brought me a clinical trial and said a researcher at UCLA reversed Alzheimer's disease in 10 patients. And he practices medicine like you. I think you'd be interested. And my first thought, Robert, same with you, is no, he didn't. You didn't reverse Alzheimer's in anybody. That's poppycock. And I put it in a box and I thought, I don't have time to read this right now. He's in clinical practice. But I was more intrigued about how the pharmacist perceived my practice of medicine than what the doctor actually did in the study, because he'd only received my prescriptions, through telephone calls or scripts or whatever. That Christmas, I took my kids skiing at Grand Targhee, and when everyone was exhausted, going to bed at night, I'm pulling out my studies and I'm just doing some research at night, and a light went on. Because every clinical trial in medicine is really looking at one variable. So it's looking at a variable against a placebo. So it's double-blinded, placebo-controlled, these clinical trials that look at one variable. This was the first time that I'd witnessed a doctor look at 36 variables and say each one of these variables have to be optimized in a senior patient in order to improve their cognitive health. And it struck me as that's total common sense. It would be the equivalent of taking a heavy exerciser like a professional athlete, saying the only thing that you need to do is work on sprints. Just sprint every day. That's all you need to do. That doesn't make any sense. Professional athletes have weight trainers and they have dietitians and they have people who work on their psychiatry, their psychology of sport. This is the same thing that we should be doing with seniors. We should look at multiple variables. So Dr. Bredesen was one of the first, but that opened the field where multiple neurologists, multiple experts started saying there are multivariate analysis that can change the way that seniors age.
Love it.
I want to roll that back though, especially with everything that we're seeing recently with the FDA kind of taking the warning labels off of hormone replacement therapy, which I think is ridiculously long overdue and probably its own episode over there. But we're talking so much about the senior population, which I think is the lane we want to stay in. But when you have worked with these individuals and their families, are you sitting there thinking like, oh my gosh, if only we'd met 2 decades prior to? I want to ask 2 questions real quick. Rob, why do you think HRT was demonized for so long?
It's like other areas in medicine that sometimes there's one study or one piece of evidence that people grab onto and hold onto it forever. And so, I think where Randy's going, you don't want necessarily to have unopposed estrogen for a long period of time because it can increase the risk of things like breast cancer or other cancers. And so that little tidbit gets out and then everyone says, don't do it. It's horrible. When in fact, that's not accurate. There needs to be further studies to delineate what the risks and benefits are. And so I think that's what happens in medicine and it becomes dogma. I wonder if we can revisit something that you brought up earlier. You talked about putting people on the enhanced protocol and the anecdote you shared around someone had a score of 15 out of 30. And then afterwards, they increased to 30 out of 30. I'm not sure I'm 30 out of 30, but that's a topic for another day. So outside of that assessment that you did, what can you share around, people might feel better and they might subjectively report feeling better. There might be some anecdotes from the family. Oh yeah, they seem less forgetful. But what are some of the objective measures that you use to say, hey, this is working? And whatever we've done, whatever interventions we've implemented, they've improved, this person has improved their cognitive function. What can you share with us around on some of those assessments?
Yeah, that's a great question. And we're always limited by the degree that we can measure. So for example, if you're looking at a cognitive test, the 15 out of 30 versus 30 out of 30, that was using a Montreal cognitive assessment, which is a common dementia test, but it's not a fine-toothed comb. And for a lot of younger people, we like to use a test called CNS vital signs that's been administered over 20 million times in the last 2 decades. And so there's a lot of data points to compare to. And it could take a guy like me that's 50 and compare me to other 50-year-old males and quantify in a more fine-tuned way lots of different areas of cognitive functioning, whether it's processing speed or executive functioning or cognitive flexibility and so on. And so when we see significant shifts in those scores, like we recently helped a man who's in his early 40s who at baseline had an overall neurocognition index on this test in the 68th percentile, and we were able to intervene with things that took him to the 99th percentile. You can't really game something like that. So that's one objective thing that you can look at. In our seniors, we also often are using tools like balance plates where we can measure things like sway, and we can look at fall risk. And when someone goes from a very high fall risk, where their balance is in like the 7th percentile for their age, and over time we can help them heal and progressively get better, and they get to where they have a moderate to low fall risk. Well, that's another objective thing. When people's ability to put words together changes, that's somewhat subjective, but we've seen some people who were hardly talking at all that start talking again a little bit better. We had a client several years ago at a pilot trial location who had been a Hoyer lift transfer for a decade, and she was literally 100 years old.
Wow.
And, throughout my professional career, I would look at something like that and say, yeah, you're not turning that around.
Mm-mm.
And yet by using some targeted medical devices, she was actually able to start producing enough more energy at the cellular level that within a few months, she went from Hoyer lift transfer to walking 75 feet with a walker and a one-person assist. So from the facility standpoint, wow, they improved their staff ratio 100% because now one person could take care of her. And she had the dignity of being able to sit on the edge of the bed and participate in the dressing process. And her bowels worked better because she was vertical and moving around a little bit more. So those things are both a combination of subjective and objective. But when you're seeing signals in both of those areas, you have a pretty good sense, hey, we're moving the needle here. This is making a difference.
Makes sense.
What is the appetite, though, for, in your opinion, for the skilled nursing facility, which is, there's a lot of great quality, there is a lot of marginal quality, there's a lot of great people working in the long-term care, I think, environment here in the United States with a lot of good intentions. But I think that in getting to know you, I think about maybe if I had a grandparent who had dementia, who had some of these comorbidities, if you will. It's not necessarily the idea of that they're going to get better and come home, but that they're able to be there in a high quality care center and just enjoy and have a higher quality of life and be safer, especially if we're minimizing the fall risk. Am I kind of packaging that together? Like, it's not always, oh, we can reverse it, but simply the quality that they have in the facility sounds like it could be transformational.
I agree that that's part of it, but I think it actually goes beyond that. I think there's something fundamentally that people have accepted that is wrong. I think we have the skills and the tools to do something differently. Imagine the trajectory of a person's health. And when someone has to come into an assisted living community or skilled nursing or some other sort of long-term care, you could say that the trajectory is on a downhill slope. Otherwise, they wouldn't need to move into a community setting of some sort. And let's not be under any delusions here. Nobody wakes up and looks in the mirror and says, I hope today is the day that I get to be institutionalized. We all want to maintain our health. So people are declining because they have problems going on. It's often many, many different things that have converged to cause their health to be on this downward trajectory. And they get to a point in that slope where they can't take care of themselves anymore, and we need some professional assistance. Great. So what has happened for years? Well, professionals come in, and upon admission, we've got to do an assessment, and we've got to get physician orders. And especially in assisted living, what that looks like is, well, what meds are they on? What supplements have they been taking? What are their diet orders? We basically take everything that's already been going on, which you could argue is part of what's gotten them to that point. It's at least not changing the trajectory, or they wouldn't even need to move in. And we just rubber stamp it, make that the care plan. So we essentially meet people on the decline and we just continue down with them. But instead, what we could, and I believe should be doing, is when they get to that point, we have an opportunity to intervene as professionals now and say, hey, let's figure out as much as we possibly can about why your trajectory is so steep. Let's look at some root cause factors and do everything possible to change that trajectory. And if that means that you're one of the people that actually gets to move back home, great. We're not going to make any promises about that. But what we are going to promise is we're going to roll up our sleeves. We're going to work as hard as possible to craft a plan that gives you a hope of changing the trajectory. If we can keep you more mobile, if we can improve the amount of care that you need, if we can shift things so that your quality of life is significantly better, then we've done something that makes a difference. And it goes way beyond just helping keep you comfortable while things crash and burn. I think it's often like, think about a plane that's trying to get to the runway, but instead the engine catches on fire. We're headed toward the ground. And meanwhile, the flight attendants are passing out milk and cookies, trying to keep everybody comfortable and ignoring the fact that this plane is going down. And instead, if we can change the trajectory and at least get to the runway, nobody's arguing that death isn't the end of the ride. The number one cause of death is birth. It's going to happen. But could we change the trajectory and make it a little bit less bumpy? I think all the problems in long-term care that keep administrators and nurses up at night and that frustrate families, whether it's the behavioral problems or rapid decline or wound issues. It all starts upon admission with not having the right plan that people need to change the trajectory. And that's what Randy and I and our team are absolutely passionate about changing in this world.
Eric, I love the analogy, the runway analogy. Randy, I want to get your insight on something, that I've read a fair amount around isolation and isolation contributing to cognitive decline. And so I want to counterbalance that with, there's also quite a bit of literature that talks about needing to spend time alone and be bored and not constantly be stimulated by social media and other things. And so what's the right balance, and help educate us a little bit on how much isolation is the right amount of isolation, or what type of isolation is detrimental to cognitive function?
Awesome question. The brain thrives when it is stimulated. And the brain, we cheapen the brain by suggesting the brain has a function. It runs our body and our mind. But our brain is really like 20 organs wrapped up between our ears. You have a section that manages your mood, and a section that manages your vision and your hearing. And you have a motor section and a sensory section and a coordinating section. You have a you have all of these different organs, if you will. They're regions of the brain that we've identified. Those regions of the brain function best when they're challenged, when they're stimulated. And so inherent in your question is, how do we stimulate the different parts of our brain within a threshold that's healthy? You come from the military, and you would never shoot a gun without ear protection, right? Hearing protection, because the stimulus is too aggressive. It's going to run your hearing. And we would never look directly at the sun. The stimulus is just too aggressive. It would blind us. So there has to be the Goldilocks approach. It can't be too hard. It can't be too soft. It has to be just right. And one of the challenges in modern day medicine is we give a global statement that should apply to every single person. Here's the right diet. Here's how you should exercise. Here's how you should lower your cholesterol for every single person, right? And I think we miss the opportunity to personalize that. So inherent in your question, I agree. Stimulus for the brain, that's concept of isolation. We need emotional care. We need a stimulus to our brain that is a healthy stimulus. And I think that's different for each person. I want my teenagers to have less social media stimulus and more kind of calm spiritual stimulus. And the flip side is I want my parents to have more engagement. Like if I said I gave my mom for Christmas, my mom is 85. About 5 years ago, I gave her a smartphone. And she's like, Randy, I can't manage this smartphone. My mom needed that input. She needed that stimulus. And it's taken some time, but my mom can take a picture and text it to me.
Wow.
My mom can open her email on a smartphone at 85. So I guess I don't know exactly how to answer your question other than there's an individual piece. Are we talking about teenagers, or are we talking about 80-year-old seniors? Everyone has a different need to stimulate their mind and their brain and their emotional centers and their calm a little bit different.
So what I hear you saying is probably the extremes are bad, right?
Absolutely.
None isn't good, but constant also isn't good. And on the isolation side, what I'm imagining is, someone's spouse dies, and so they're in the home alone, and they don't have much social interaction. Maybe they spend their time watching game shows, and their life is kind of contracting, and their brain is probably contracting with it.
Yes, that very senior, if you invite them over for family dinner, 15 minutes later, they're like, dude, I got to get out of here. There's just too much going on. There's too much stimulus, because they've down-regulated their entire sensory system that I can't handle hearing and vision and lights and kids and noise and movement. I just can't do it anymore. Those people, we need to challenge that in some way to that right threshold.
I thought it was just me that they were leaving early, but I guess it's because
What, have you been to my house for dinner?
Randy, I'd love to go deeper on exactly what you're talking about. And you alluded to, you gave us a few of the elements earlier, but for some of the listeners who say, okay, you had me at hello, there are lifestyle things that I can do today that are going to impact me 30 years from now, right? one of the troubles that people have with saving for retirement is they can't visualize themselves in retirement. I've got bills to pay today, so I'm going to use my money to pay the bills today and not save money for retirement later. But think about if we put it in the context of I'm going to invest in my physical health and my brain health and my psychological health today. Give us, 4 or 5 things. What are those best practices that people could be doing? And you hinted around alcohol, but what are the other things that people should be doing to optimize their brain health, for the future, for today and for the future?
Yeah, okay. So here's the framework, and I'm going to give you context by population.
Great.
So in our group, the 4 of us on this call today, we always start with lifestyle. We always start with how are we eating? How are we exercising or moving? How are we sleeping? What's our dental health? How much alcohol do we drink? Are you a smoker or not a smoker? How much stimulus do we have to our brain? Those healthy things. That is the starting point. I'm not confident that's the starting point in an assisted living center. Many of these people don't have an exercise routine. They don't have, we can still make changes, but I'm giving context by population. The next one is that food is deficient in micronutrients. That is established by testing and research. Robert, if you draw labs on someone and you look at a vitamin B12 level, the range is this big. From the low side to the high side, we've captured 2 standard deviations from the norm, which is reflective it's worthless in its testing. Every micronutrient should be in the 90th percentile. Okay, every one of them. Vitamin B1, the Alzheimer's Association is currently spending $35 million looking at high-dose vitamin B1 therapy for a treatment for Alzheimer's. Vitamin B9, we use vitamin B9 folic acid to prevent brain damage or neural tube defects in a developing fetus. There's now been a link to autism. Are you kidding me? We need vitamin B9 in high dose in Alzheimer's disease. Vitamin B12 has been established for 30 years as a contributor towards hallucinations and dementia. That needs to be in the upper thresholds. We need high levels of vitamin D because it modulates the immune system. We need vitamin E. We need magnesium levels that are high. Serum magnesium is a poor marker of magnesium levels. We need something more like a magnesium RBC. Omega-3s, there's been 30 years of data in the power and anti-inflammatory response of omega-3. But if you ask a senior how often they eat salmon, do you know what the answer is?
0.
I think I had it last year. Okay. So raising that omega-3 level completely changes cardiovascular risk factors, which is a risk factor for cognition. We need glutathione. We need antioxidants. We're a statin nation, and statins deplete CoQ10. Why isn't every senior on a high level of CoQ10 or glutathione? So micronutrients is a category, okay? The next category would be hormone optimization. FSH, follicle stimulating hormone, Nicole would relate with this, being the only female on our call today. That's a brain hormone. That brain hormone receives the stimulus from the ovaries about how much estrogen's there. And when estrogen drops, FSH goes up. Doc, you would never tell a patient who comes in with a TSH of 30, don't worry about it. It's no big deal. You don't need to improve your thyroid, your TSH. TSH comes from the same pituitary gland. It's a feedback. So after menopause, FSH skyrockets. The brain is saying, I need more hormone. So estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, DHEA, pregnenolone. And we live in a it's almost a bipolar society where Nicole talked about these testosterone clinics. I did a treatment summary for a woman today whose estradiol level was 66 and her total testosterone was 180. And I know why. It's because she went and got a testosterone pellet. But no one's paying attention to FSH, estradiol, progesterone, testosterone, and pregnenolone. We need to address those items, right? I could just keep rattling on, but I wanted to answer your question very specifically. What would we do for our seniors? Eric and I did a $100,000 clinical trial at an assisted living center in Washington. The community paid for it, cash out of pocket, looked at all of the labs for 28 residents, everything that we just talked about. And I can tell you, it was embarrassing. It was deplorable how low the nutrition level was for these seniors, and just optimizing those levels to see the outcomes and the changes that they had were mind-blowing.
So I didn't hear anything about sleep. Sleep in there?
Essential, absolutely essential. On the same roadmap that I wrote today, the lady consumes alcohol about 3 times per week and takes an over-the-counter sleep medicine. Now, one of the terrible side effects of alcohol is it goofs up people's sleep. And one of the contraindications to sleep or to OTC sleep medicine is that cognitive problems. So like antihistamines are the mainstay. And so you just cycle
Spiral.
through this, it spin cycle through the challenges. So yeah, sleep's essential.
Gotcha.
What is, especially in someone who's having a cognitive decline, what does quality sleep look like?
I use these terms: consistency, quantity, and quality. So meaning consistently, are people going to bed at about the same time and getting up at about the same time? We have a circadian rhythm. So when we go to bed at 9 o'clock one night and 1 o'clock in the morning the next day, and we sleep until noon and we get up at 5, that consistency screws people up. Quantity is, I worked with one of my business partners for many years that would come to work, and he sent me an email at 3 o'clock in the morning. And I said, dude, what are you doing at 3 o'clock in the morning? And he says, I can sleep when I'm dead. And my response is, well, that's good to know, because you're going to be dead soon. You don't get enough sleep. You need quantity. Somewhere between about 7 hours is kind of that sweet spot. And then quality of sleep is, do you have a sleep disorder? Do you have sleep apnea? Do you have central apnea? Do you snore all night long? Did your oxygen level drop? So I use those terms: consistency, quality, and quantity.
One thing that people don't appreciate about sleep, just to throw one quick thing in here, is that sleep, we've learned since about 2014, is when the brain literally takes out the trash. The glymphatic system, which is the waste clearance mechanism of the brain that's only beginning to be better understood, clears out trash while we're sleeping. So it's kind of like running the dishwasher at night. And if you fail to turn on the dishwasher, the dishes pile up and pretty soon you got nothing left. And that happens in the brain. Literally the process that flushes out misfolded proteins and cellular waste and debris runs largely while we're asleep. And so if we are not getting sleep, you might be able to get away with it in the short term and feel like you're doing okay. But it's going to eat you for lunch in the long run.
We've mentioned enhanced protocol several times throughout the conversation. Give us a high-level overview. So someone says, okay, I'm sold. I want to go ahead and do the enhanced protocol. What's entailed? What do people need to do? How does it work? Give us an overview of the enhanced protocol.
Yeah, great question. And it's basically the same process, whether someone is at that inflection point moving into a long-term care setting and we're trying to change the trajectory, or someone really wants to have better health today and better outcomes, more energy, more focus, more concentration, more productivity at work, and they also want to prevent things downstream. So same process in both populations, but we've got to measure, learn, apply, and adjust. So we measure all of these things that Randy's been talking about in a blood test. We also do a baseline cognitive test, so we have something objective to compare against. We gather an extensive health history questionnaire so that we know some things that have been contributing and we know something about a person's lifestyle. When all of that data comes back, then Randy writes what we call a roadmap report, because it tells you how to go from where you are to a better place. The magic of what we do is in the coaching. It's in helping people know how to apply those things. It's meeting people where they are in that personalized, precise way and helping them figure out what the Goldilocks zone is for them. And then as they apply those interventions for about 3 months, we monitor progress, we coach them through, we identify trouble spots. And then once they've been doing it long enough, we redo the blood tests minus the genetic tests, and we redo a cognitive test. And we kind of gather all that information again and then write a new treatment summary, change dosing of things, triangulate. And at that point, especially younger people are really on a path where they understand their bodies better. They understand what helps them produce really good energy and how to get the best outcomes. And they continue forward after that. And we're always there to support and coach and help along the way.
Doc,
Sorry,
can I
Nicole.
add one thing real quick?
Yeah, go ahead, Randy.
This is important. You and I have grown up in a medical community that spends an exquisite amount of time naming a diagnosis. For example, if you open up the DSM-5, there's about 8 different variants of attention deficit disorder. There's hyperactive and inattentive. And when we talk about dementia, there's frontal temporal lobe, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, Lewy body dementia, Hicks dementia, posterior cortical atrophy. We spend an enormous amount of money and time to name the diagnosis. The enhanced protocol spends an enormous amount of time identifying the risk factors for the decline.
Mm-hmm.
We need to shift that. I'm not critical of the neurological community. I'm grateful for the contribution of the diagnostics, but it's anemic when it comes to why does the individual have dementia in the first place? What is driving that problem? That is what the enhanced protocol is. We sit down with clients and say, why are you experiencing the symptoms that you're experiencing? What are your risk factors and how can we manage those? That's another kind of conceptual way to look at the enhanced protocol.
Yeah, one of the things I love about it, it sounds like it's one size fits one, right? It's not a here's what we tell everyone to do. It's here are some standard things that we recommend, but here's what is specific to you and your risk factors based on, the information that you gathered. So, Eric, based on what you shared, it sounds like a fair amount of this, minus the supplements, right? The micronutrients and other things. A lot of it is lifestyle change, though. It's healthy lifestyle change. And so it requires some behavior change in people, eating differently, sleeping differently, maybe, limiting alcohol. What kind of challenge, we all know losing weight is hard. I will vouch for that. And that's because it takes a consistent lifestyle change. So what kind of success do you see with people who you're telling you got to live a different life?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's one of the hardest things that we do. And there's not an easy answer, but I think what helps us to have success with people is genuinely meeting them where they are and helping them have small successes that then mushroom and build. Yep. Momentum as a word means you are in motion. And too many people try to go from a standstill to 65 miles an hour in an instant. So for example, someone that's been sedentary for 50 years, and they think the answer is to just get a gym membership. And all of a sudden, that's like a 0 to 65 overnight. And it never works. We all know the jokes about how full the gyms are on January 2nd and how empty they are by February 1st. So our approach to that is things like we've partnered with 7 Movements Health, which is a company out of Canada. They've got exercise physiologists and experts in microdose exercising. They're extremely good at meeting people where they are and figuring out, why is it hard for you to move? Does it hurt for you to move? And they analyze in a very personalized way what's holding someone back. And they'll start with something like, okay, I want you to do 7 1-minute microdose exercises throughout the course of a day. Here's exactly the ones that I want you to do based on what you need. And let's get that shoulder moving again. Let's help you start moving and having success with movement so that you don't feel like a failure out of the gate. That's way more successful. And when it comes to things like the dietary approach, everybody's hung up in tribalism and dogma. And if people think that there's one perfect diet for every single human on the planet, then they probably don't understand physiology very well. But when you identify where someone is already having successes, and then you add the next right step, and then you meet again and you add another right step, they start feeling more and more successful. And pretty soon they begin to believe in themselves. And as things shift and the weight starts to come off and their mood and energy are improving, then they start to believe, hey, I can actually do this.
Like it. Maybe this is for you, Randy, or Eric, feel free to jump in. For folks who feel like, gosh, the enhanced protocol feels like a lot, not ready to take that step, want to maybe, start small and start slow. What are some best practices that people can do, today to start moving in the right direction?
Piggybacking on your last question about lifestyle, I would ask people to eat real food. Just anything that's been highly processed that comes in a package with an expiration date and an ingredient list, stay away from it. Eat an avocado. There's no ingredient list on that. There's no calorie counter on that. Eat an apple, eat a steak, eat some eggs. That's doable at every level. And it's amazing how much eating real food. Here's one just dumb story. A teenage boy that was suicidal came to me when I asked him what he ate. He says, well, every day I eat mac and cheese, Pop-Tarts, and top ramen. And I said, oh, this is such good news. I'm so glad to hear that. And he looked at me like I was crazy. And I said, because listen, Prozac is not going to overcome Pop-Tarts, top ramen, and mac and cheese. If you just eat something fresh, whole, raw, organic, live, it'll change your life. When this kid came back, he visibly looked different. Wow. And I was going through my progress note trying to figure out what medicine did I start on this kid? Because he looks pretty damn good.
Working.
I can't believe it. I got to use that medicine more often. And I asked him, I'm like, oh, how did you do? You look so good. How are you feeling with that medicine? He goes, dude, I never filled the medicine. I did exactly what you asked me to do. I started eating like real food, and I can't believe how much better I feel. That's the cheapest starting place and the easiest place across the board.
This has been incredible. Quite the education from both of you. For the individuals or the family members, though, Eric and Randy, who want to learn more, possibly want to enroll themselves or a loved one in your program, where would they go? What's the starting point?
Yeah, I'll give you two simple things to do. You can text the word optimize to 72000, 72,000. And you'll get a series of very short videos that Randy and I put together that further explain how the enhanced protocol works and give you an opportunity, if you want to take this step from there to sign up, you can actually do that. Or go to amindforallseasons.com. There's lots of tools and resources and freebies and information there for anybody that's interested.
We'll definitely have all of your information in the description below. Thank you both so much. We hope we can have you back again. Just absolutely fascinating, and keep up the amazing work that you're doing. Everyone deserves it.
Thank you so much, Nicole and Rob. Great to be with you.
And so everyone, this podcast is brought to you by Hunter Ambrose. We're a premier executive search and consulting firm helping organizations build strong leadership, stronger teams, and a stronger future. If you enjoyed today's episode, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who would benefit. Thanks so much, and we'll see you soon. Take good care.